In this video we are going to take a closer look at last week's surprise release of the quarterly balance update series for matched play. Wait, what? Additional quarterly balance updates? That's right guys, GW is stepping it up a notch. Over the course of the video, we will first look at what exactly this new balance update series is and what the first release has in store for us. In the second part, we will then discuss its potential impact on the Deathwatch and the currently popular meta lists. Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video. Well, I have to say that I was quite positively surprised when GW announced their new quarterly series of balance updates for matched play last week. While their recent survey included questions about rules errata and points updates, I did not expect that they already had something in store for us. The so-called balanced Dataslate is basically a short list of rules tweaks aimed at boosting struggling factions as well as reining in some overperformers. They complement the regular chapter-approved Grand Tournament mission packs as we know them, so we will still get these as before. Link to the Warhammer community article including the balanced Dataslate is in the description. In this first release, we got one universal rule for matched play, as well as updates to 8 factions. Starting with the universal rule, this one puts a hard cap on the number of aircraft models you can include in your army. 1 for combat patrol or incursion, 2 for strike force, and 3 for onslaught. While this has clearly been aimed at overperforming AdMech and Orks lists dominating the meta until recently, GW stated in their Warhammer community article that they want aircrafts to have a supportive role at best in Warhammer 40k. As veterans of previous editions might well remember, aircrafts have been causing balancing issues before, such as with the Eldari flyer spam. Moving on to the 8 factions included in the balance update, we have 2 of them receiving a very clear nerf, AdMech and Orks. For AdMech, there is an entire page worth of points adjustments, all of them except one being points increases. This includes various Kitari, the Iron Strider Ballistari, and 2 of the aircrafts. The only unit to get an actual points decrease are the Castellan robots, which went down by 10 points. For the Orks, they put a cap of 1 per unit on a variety of buggies and trucks. Combined with the cap on aircrafts, this severely restricts the unfun speedwag meta lists we've seen before. Next up we have Drukhari, which similar to AdMech received an entire page worth of points adjustments, but unlike AdMech, they received both point increases to overperforming units as well as point decreases for some of the less played ones. I think this is a great way to rein in some of the worst offenders while still throwing a bone to the players. The remaining 5 factions then all received straight buffs. Guard got a 2+ save for their Leman Russ models and some buffs to orders. Chaos Space Marines now have their Death to the False Emperor ability affect all factions. Both Imperial and Chaos Knights get some much needed boosts to holding objectives. And finally Necrons get the core keyword added to a variety of datasheets. All in all, excellent boosts for factions that very much needed it. As the keen observer may have guessed by now, there have been no faction-specific changes to both Space Marines and Deathwatch. Having said that, what does it mean for the Deathwatch anyway? Bad news first, the infamous triple Corvus lists are dead. GW finally came for Nevin Smith and put an end to his reign of airborne terror. Right, I am saying this somewhat in jest of course. While one of the most beautiful models as far as I'm concerned, the Corvus Blackstar is in a bit of an odd spot at the moment. It's not an obvious pick like some of the Dreadnoughts, but it's also not a bad model for the creative Deathwatch player. The mentioned Nevin Smith did some pioneer work with triple Corvus Blackstar lists that could hold their ground well enough in a competitive setting. The limit of 2 flyers obviously won't break Deathwatch. Personally, I think one of them is generally enough, with 2 being the upper limit I could see in an Army of Renown. With that out of the way, let's look at what I consider a clear advantage of the absence of any Space Marine changes. It's of course the Dreadnoughts. While Space Marines in general are somewhere around mid-tier, with recent win rates hovering at around 46%, Dreadnoughts continue to overperform, and Deathwatch does them particularly well. Combined with the strong kill teams, this has resulted in Deathwatch scoring well above the average Space Marine chapter, often being ranked and rated as top Marines. This remains unchanged. For anyone who got a little worried about Relic Contemptor Dreadnoughts with twin Volkites, or even Redemptor Dreadnoughts, this does not appear to be a balancing priority for GW at the moment. While certainly great for the popular Dreadnought lists dominating the Deathwatch meta, it is a bit unfortunate for the freshly released Army of Renown, the Kill Team Strike Force. I've covered the Strike Force in more detail in previous videos, the links are in the description. In short, the recent rise of the Deathwatch happened primarily due to Dreadnoughts, and while the Strike Force has some amazing new rules, it also has harsh restrictions on datasheets, excluding Dreadnoughts, while also requiring specialisms on the kill teams. The latter is particularly problematic because specialisms have only rarely seen competitive play and are in dire need of a rebalance. This means that the new Army of Renown will have a hard time to make a notable dent in the competitive scene, and it is very likely that the Deathwatch meta will remain in favor of Dreadnought lists and utility picks outside of kill teams. Then finally, what consequences could these changes to the other factions have for matchups with Deathwatch? First of all, the AdMech and Ork nerfs are a straight win for Deathwatch. Their recent meta lists were very oppressive for pretty much any army, including Deathwatch, as was for instance demonstrated at the recent London GT, where the controversial Alex Harrison representing Deathwatch was blasted to oblivion by AdMech in pretty much a single alpha strike in the finals. Beyond that, what I think will be interesting for Deathwatch are the Drukhari changes. Deathwatch has been doing particularly well against these, even before they received some initial nerfs. Much of the current Deathwatch Dreadnought meta lists basically had its roots from the attempts to counter the Drukhari menace. Given their points changes, it is likely that we will see their competitive lists shift to different datasheets, which in turn might end up in more difficult matchups for Deathwatch. We will have to wait and see. Another one to potentially look out for are the Necrons. Based on the tournament results of these last few months, these have been a favorable matchup for Deathwatch so far. Nonetheless, the core keyword literally makes or breaks datasheets in this current edition, so I am expecting Necrons to return with a vengeance. I would watch out for these. Along those same lines, the changes to Knights and Guard favor heavy vehicle type of models, an old issue of Deathwatch if you are not prepared for it. Chaos Space Marines should remain largely unchanged for us. Their boost primarily affects Xenos races, though I think these really need their 9th edition codex in order to compete. As a general advice, if you were thinking of investing into Dreadnoughts, now is as good a time as ever to do so, as they have successfully dodged any points or rules adjustments, at least up until the next quarterly update or the chapter approved update, whichever will be released first. Aside from that, kill teams remain a safe investment as well, with the Proteus kill teams remaining the most dominant one in competitive play. For more information on its competitive loadouts, check out my guide linked in the description. Given this new quarterly series of balance updates, what I would advise against is investing into datasheets exclusively used to counter overperforming rising stars in the meta. As we have seen with both AdMech and Orks, and partly Drukhari, GW is keeping a close eye on the tournament scene, and in these cases, specifically targeted units used in some of the popular tournament winning lists. As a more casual player, it will be difficult to keep up with a quarterly update cycle if your sole priority is to address imbalances in the current metagame. As always, all competitiveness aside, I advise especially newer players to stick to established picks that fit well into the kill teams of the Deathwatch. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at the freshly introduced quarterly series of balance updates for matched play. In this first release, we get one universal rule for matched play, as well as updates to 8 factions. The universal rule limits flyers to 2 models per army in a 2000 points game, while GW has announced that they wish to keep aircrafts in Warhammer 40k as a supporting role only. This change is clearly with the current dominance of AdMech and Ork meta lists in mind. Speaking of which, AdMech has been hit by heavy points nerfs, while Orks suffer from further restrictions to the number of buggies and trucks that they can take. Drukhari, on the other hand, has received both point increases as well as decreases, basically in an attempt to shift the focus away from several overperforming datasheets. Then lastly, both Knights, Guard, Necrons and Chaos Space Marines have all received buffs. While both Space Marines and Deathwatch have not received direct faction-specific updates, the limit on flyers means that triple Corvus Blackstar lists are now dead. On the other hand, Dreadnoughts remain untouched and will likely continue to be the staple of competitive Deathwatch lists. As far as I'm concerned, the Army of Renown remains a bit of an enigma. With the limited datasheets and mandatory specialisms for kill teams, it will be a challenge to make these kinds of lists outperform the Dreadnought spam. For matchups, I would recommend keeping an eye out in particular for Drukhari and Necrons. Deathwatch has been doing well against these in the past, and it remains to be seen if the traditional Dreadnought spam will continue to do so against future iterations of competitive lists from these factions. Last but not least, with quarterly balance updates now having been confirmed, I would advise against investing too hard into specific hard counters to the meta, as overperforming units will in all likelihood be nerfed accordingly, as has been demonstrated with both AdMech and Orks. All in all, I think Deathwatch remains firmly seated as one of the top performing Space Marine armies. So that's it for the release of the quarterly balance update series for match play and its potential impact on the Deathwatch. How do you guys rate these changes, and how do you think it will affect Deathwatch? Any changes you are doing to your lists? Let me know in the comments. Finally, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. I do also have a Patreon page. If you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated, as it helps me invest into future videos. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again, and see you next time.